Welcome back to this video series focused on uncovering insights from Aristotle's Poetics for today's fiction writers. In the last video, we explored the concept of representation, defining it as something that stands for or symbolizes something else. For instance, a thumbtack on a military map can represent an armored division in real life. As Aristotle briefly noted, humans have an inherent inclination towards representation. We find satisfaction in recognizing familiar things through symbols, especially in art, and take pleasure in the learning that comes from it. In essence, pleasure in representation arises from a blend of innate curiosity, the joy of learning, and the satisfaction of recognizing and understanding what is represented. As humans encounter representations, they derive intellectual pleasure from the process of decoding, understanding, and internalizing the information presented. Finally, we established that fictional stories are a form of representation, briefly highlighting three core insights for further discussion. First, that the central focus of fictional narratives is the representation of human actions, portrayed through a cast of characters. Second, that the main distinctions between characters are based on their moral standing. And finally, that serious fictional narratives aim to uplift moral nobility. In this video, we're going to dive deeper into the first of these three insights regarding human action and see what treasures we can uncover. Epic poetry and tragedy are all, taken as a whole, forms of representation. The things that representative artists represent are the actions of people. We rephrase this as fictional narratives represent human action through their cast of characters. Let's start by asking, is human activity truly the essential focus of representation in narrative? Moreover, what did Aristotle mean by human action, or the actions of people? And is it possible for a fictional narrative to exist without representing human action? These are basic questions, but they need answering before we can confidently discuss and apply the idea that narratives represent human action. Answering them requires us to confront what a narrative can represent from what it must represent, which means we first need a clear sense of what a narrative is. Aristotle didn't provide a strict definition of narrative, but his concept of muthos gives a close approximation. Muthos is sometimes translated as story or plot, and can be defined as a structured, purposeful representation of human action through causally connected events. This approximate definition of narrative, emphasizing the representation of human action as structured, purposeful, and causally connected, necessarily implies that narratives must portray a rational being engaged in goal-directed, purposeful action. This teleological focus is the minimum requirement for a representation to qualify as a narrative. We can even say that Aristotle's idea of human action encompasses all forms of goal-directed activity by rational beings. Here, action refers to intentional, purposeful behavior, and human applies to rational beings capable of setting and pursuing goals. So, human action covers any activity understood as meaningful within a rational, goal-oriented framework. This opens the door for narratives to represent purposeful action by non-human agents, as long as the actions are seen as intentional and goal-driven. For instance, a non-human agent, a sentient animal, an angel, or even an alien, can still embody human action if its behavior is purposeful. Through analogy, anthropomorphism, or narrative projection, audiences can perceive these non-human figures as agents within a story's structure. For example, consider how a sentient animal like a dog or an elephant might represent human action. When a rational audience observes its struggles or achievements and interprets its behavior as goal-driven, it engages in a process of narrative projection. This allows the audience to view the animal's journey as one of purposeful action, even if the creature itself lacks full rational agency. Similarly, natural forces or abstract concepts can also act as characters with goals, intentions, and struggles. By framing impersonal forces like storms or seasons as though they have purpose or direction, a narrative can create meaning in the same way a character-driven story does. The essential requirement remains: that these actions must be understood as meaningful, teleological, and purposeful from the audience's perspective, regardless of the agent performing them. Narratives at their core are crafted by rational beings for rational audiences. Even stories that follow patterns without individual characters or specific goals often imply or project a teleological sequence, a broader purpose or process meaningful to the human condition. For example, a character without a goal is simply a confused character whose goal is, ironically, to have no goal. As long as the sequence resonates with human experience or conveys universal themes such as survival, change, or harmony, it becomes meaningful in a narrative sense, fulfilling Aristotle's idea of purposeful, goal-oriented action, even without a single character focus or a linear plot. In sum, fictional narratives are representations of human action, goal-directed activity by rational beings, or, through analogy, anthropomorphism, or narrative projection, non-human agents that embody purposeful behavior. Such actions are understood as meaningful to the human condition from a rational perspective. With this definition of narrative and understanding of human action, we've clarified what a narrative is, at minimum, and what it must and can represent. It's now reasonable to move forward on Aristotle's foundation, namely, on the acceptance that fictional narratives represent human action. In the next video, we'll dive deeper into the concept of human action and explore how writers can use it to strengthen their storytelling. We'll examine how various forms of representation serve narrative goals, and how those forms can be structured into practical frameworks to refine a writer's approach to crafting their story. We'll see you in the next one.